Good afternoon. Hello and welcome to the Learning House webinar series presentation, Recruiting, Orienting, and Supporting Online Adjunct Faculty Survey Practices. Today we have all three authors of the report here, including Russell Poulin and Dr. David Kleinfelter. Russell Poulin is the Director of Policy and Analysis at WCET, the WICHE Cooperative for Educational Technologies, where he organizes national policy and research activities, edits WCET's Frontier blog, coordinates their research efforts, and works on e-learning consortia issues. Russ represented the distance education community in the U.S. Department of Education's 2014 negotiating rulemaking process. And thank you for joining us today, Russ. Dr. David Kleinfelter is the Chief Academic Officer at Learning House, where he works with the company's online partners to develop academic tools, trainings, and strategies for their online initiatives. Dave has worked at all levels of education, from K-12 through higher ed, and at both for-profit and nonprofit institutions. Prior to joining Learning House, Dave served as the CAO at both Walden and Kaplan universities, and is president of Graceland University, an early innovator of online learning. Thank you for joining us today as well, Dave. My name is Andrew Magda. I'm also a co-author of the report, and I'm the manager of market research at Learning House, and I'll be your host here today. Before we get started, I wanted to review a few housekeeping items to let you know how you can participate in today's session. First, please verify that you're dialed in today using the unique attendee ID found on the Event Info tab in WebEx located on the upper left-hand portion of your screen. If you're not, please do so now. Today's presentation will last approximately 45 minutes and will be followed by 15 minutes of Q&A. You're encouraged to type a question into the Q&A window and press send so everyone here can see your question. I will be monitoring the Q&A and responding to some of the questions directly in the text window, as well as fielding others directly to Russ and Dave for their thoughts throughout the presentation. Once the presentation is over, you're invited to stay on the line and join us for a Q&A portion of our webinar, where we will unmute the phone line so you can ask questions directly to Russ, Dave, and myself. Note that following today's webinar, links to the presentation slides and the recording will be emailed out to you, along with a short survey intended to help us improve the Learning House webinar series. If you have any questions at this time, please type them into the Q&A window and press send so we can respond to them accordingly. But if not, let's get started. I wanted to start the webinar off today with a quick poll that you can see on the right-hand portion of your screen. It's to help us learn a little more about our audience today so we know exactly the types of individuals that we're talking to. While that poll is up, I'll just review the methodology of the survey that we conducted. The survey was disseminated in the spring to over 3,000 higher education administrators. We had responses from over 200 of them, and we had a 6.8% margin of error for those institutions responding. The responses came equally distributed over 2-year and 4-year private and public institutions. We had very few for-profit institutions respond to the survey, so I wouldn't say that the information is generalizable to the for-profit institutions, but for the 2-year and 4-year public and private institutions, we had a pretty even distribution between those groups. Following the survey, we also conducted an in-depth follow-up interviews with 8 responding institutions to delve deeper into some of the gray areas into the question and here to help provide a little more context to the data that we had in the report. So the report contains both the survey results and interesting tidbits from those interviews, and those interviews and data helped us arrive at the recommendations and conclusions that we presented in the report and that we'll be reviewing today. So if we look at some of the poll results, we have let's just see, a large number of individuals that fall into the other category and a good number of directors of online. So not too many chief academic individuals and not too many members of faculty, actually. So we have some adjunct faculty members and mostly directors of online activity and those in the other category. So with that, Dave, would you like to start with the first set of conclusions?
Yeah, before we jump into the conclusions, wanted to just share with you a couple data points that came out of the survey, but were not summarized in the conclusions themselves. First of all, as far as background information, we asked what disciplines the adjunct faculty were teaching in, and we're a little bit surprised with the results. You can see the overall results, including the public, private, 2-year and 4-year institutions, was that the single largest field of study that these adjunct faculty were teaching in was business, with 35% of the institutions indicating that. That's no surprise because business is the #1 field that's offered in the online format. The majority of online students, or the largest percentage of online students, take business classes. But it was followed in second place by English with 29% and general studies with 24%. Another discipline, education, pops up there in 4th place. And then you can see the results that trail below that. This indicates that adjuncts are often used to teach the general studies or liberal arts courses. And a general conclusion could be that the regular faculty teach the courses in the discipline more often. So interesting to see the breakdown of where the adjuncts are being used. The second slide we'd share with you is about the institutions that have limits on the number of classes that online adjuncts can teach. Let's move to the next slide, okay? Yeah, so you see here, we asked the question, if the institution has a limit, 79% said yes, 29% said no, and then of the 79% that said yes, 30% of those responding institutions limit adjuncts to teaching 1 online class, 1 to 2. Another 30%, thereabouts, 3 classes. And then you can see the data below that. One of the reasons why we wanted to share this with you is there's some significance around the question of whether or not an adjunct faculty member is part-time or full-time. If a person crosses into the full-time category, it triggers a number of federal regulations and HR rules and regs in most states. When a faculty member or an employee becomes full-time, it triggers benefits, for example. And it looks as if from this data that a number of institutions allow adjunct faculty to move into that full-time category or cross the barrier where they become eligible for benefits. So it's a word of caution for institutions that don't have a restriction or that allow 4 or 5 courses. Those institutions are probably getting close, if not passing over that barrier where the adjunct people, part-time people, become eligible for benefits. So those are 2 background points we wanted to share with you at the beginning. We'll jump into the conclusions now. Let me hand it off to Russ.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here today, and thank you to Learning House, and thank you to Andrew and David for partnering both on the survey and on this session today, in which we're giving out the results. And we do have 9 conclusions we're going to go to, and I'll start with the first few here. And so this is something that's probably not surprising to all of you, and it wasn't all that surprising to us, but we wanted to get some idea about the growth in adjunct faculty as best as we could. And on the next slide, that we did ask a few questions to find out a bit about the number of courses taught and about and also about the number of faculty who were employed. So if you look this over, we tried to get, looking at their campus, what is the mix across the campus of the institution, about how many online courses there were and how many on-campus ones. And I'll pause for a moment here also to say for our definition of online, that there's many definitions. We asked them that if they could, to use the Babson Research Group's study definition where they use 80% or or more of a course is online, but we know some went around that, but that was our best guess on that, and so tried to help them out with that. But looking at the numbers here, the things that you see that about just under a third that we had just under the third of the courses taught by adjuncts were online. The large majority of them were on-campus courses, and then there were some blended courses. And some things that we took from the large number of on-campus courses, and that we'll bring up again, is that many of the policies that were probably created for the on-campus courses also have a big impact on teaching online, and we see that here in terms of the numbers, and then may ferret that out a little bit later as well. And then just quickly looking at the standard deviations, just looking at those are rather large numbers, and it lets you know that there's high variability on these numbers among colleges. And so you have, for all of these, in terms of the number of online courses, you have up to fully online colleges that are at 100% to those who have just very few online courses taught by adjuncts. And so let's move to the next slide. And then here, adjuncts who are employed, we tried to set a time period of last 12 months, and again, looking at adjunct faculty who taught online. This question trends fairly well with the last one in terms of the distribution. We see once again just under a third of adjunct faculty who taught online only. Remember, the previous one was courses. This one is faculty. And again, that we see in terms of standard deviation, that there's quite a high range there again. And so that also tells us that in the responses that we get throughout the survey, that there's a wide variation in terms of the amount of effort in online and the amount of activity that's going on there. So that gave us some background, at least. So now let's go on to conclusion number 2. And that we're wondering, well, okay, if there's a large number of students who are or a large number of adjunct faculty, that what are some of the reasons behind this? And so we'll move to the next slides here. And let me help to interpret this graph for you a little bit, because what we did is that we came up with 6 different categories that you see here, and that we asked respondents to rank them from 1 to 6, with 1 being the top rank and 6 being the lowest rank of these 6. And like all rankings, it gives you a relative order among these, and we might miss a little bit in terms of the magnitude between the different categories, but at least it gives us some ideas about what are the main reasons why they were wanting to use adjuncts. Let's see, so, and as you go across here, these go from left to right, and so we used averages, and so the numbers that were ranked as the top, or the ones of greatest importance, appear to the left, down to those of least importance being on the right. And so we'll go through these really quickly. That in flexibility, colleges see this as a way to address the need for additional sections in courses. We've heard that several times. The cost effectiveness, well, we're certainly been enough studies and talk about the amount of money that adjuncts that is spent on adjunct pay. So that was one of the top factors, and very close to being the top factor. When we did for that third category, employing practitioners, when we initially put this survey out for review, that wasn't a category we had there. It was suggested by one of our reviewers, and that you see that they, and as it turns out many others, that they like to have faculty who are actually working in the field and can bring to the students the experience from that field, and that's a very highly ranked one. And then the next 2 I'm going to sort of put together in terms of unable to fill full-time positions and filling temporary vacancies, that those just really end up being variations on the same theme. They're often cited as reasons to hire adjuncts, but seem to be of less importance in overall in terms of forward motion in hiring them. And then finally, we had the other category. You always have another category because you never know, somebody might come up with something. But with that being very, very high up there, that tells us that we probably did a fairly good job in broad terms of capturing the other reasons that we have down there. So with that, David, I'll turn it to you for conclusion number 3.
Sure thing. Thanks, Russ. Let's take a minute here and invite people to ask questions. If you have questions or comments, either one, we would be happy to receive those. Just type them in to the Q&A section of the webinar screen there. And anytime throughout the presentation, feel free to key in a question and we'll respond to it. So the third conclusion was that employment for online instruction seems to be fairly stable. At the Learning House, we work with a number of colleges, universities across the country, and oftentimes when we take on a new partner institution that's going to offer online classes, maybe for the first time, and they have the opportunity to use adjuncts, one of the big concerns they have or questions is, will we be able to find enough adjuncts, and is there going to be lots of turnover, so we'll have a hard time keeping our classes staffed and so forth. Well, if you look at the data in the next slide here, we find that that's not a major concern, that the employment is pretty stable with these folks. It's once they're hired, they tend to stay. So the large gray area with 69% indicates that between 0 and 10% of the responding institutions had turnover that was between 0 and 10%. So the vast majority of them saw less than 10% turnover, and in the interviews that we did, many institutions said that it was 0, that there was almost no turnover in the ranks of their online adjunct faculty. If you go around the circle, those institutions that report somewhere between 11 and 20% turnover, with about a quarter, 26%, and only 5%, the small sliver at the top, indicated that they had turnover greater than 20%. So this population tends to be pretty stable and stay with an institution. Again, anecdotally, we were told as we did the interviews that many of these adjunct people taught regularly for institutions. They may have taught at the same institution for many years, that they're kind of a stable part of the faculty base, and that they expect to teach and that the institution expects them, so it becomes a long-term type relationship. The next conclusion is that the demand keeps growing. There's some data from other sources that suggests that, or estimates that about half of the courses taught in U.S. universities and colleges today are taught by adjunct or contingent faculty. That would be on ground as well as online, and those numbers tend to be increasing. So if you look at the data coming up in the next slide, we asked what their anticipated growth was. 25% of the responding institutions said that they expect, or over the past year, it went up by 5% or above. Another third, or 31%, said that they'd increase the use of adjuncts by 0 to 5%, and then 39% said it stayed the same. Only a small number, 6% of the institutions, said that they had used fewer adjuncts in the past year. So this trend of continued use and expansion of adjunct faculty to teach more and more classes in U.S. higher education seems to hold pretty true for the online environment as well. Let me flip it back to Russ now for the next couple conclusions.
Thank you, David. This recruiting is local one is one where we're maybe a little bit surprised about it. You're always thinking that in the online world that you can able to get faculty from anywhere and students from anywhere, and so geography doesn't matter, but we saw that it really does. And so let's look at the the next slide on this, that we asked about, how are they going out and recruiting for faculty. There's going down through these categories here that you see the institutional website. I'm going to start at the bottom. Institutional website, newsletters, those sorts of communications tools are used quite often. I guess it actually kind of surprised me is that that's not up closer to 100%, but I think in some of the talks that we did, some of the interviews we did, that maybe the next category might answer that, which is about the word of mouth and informal channels that we heard from more than one of those that at least I talked to, that they said quite often that there's a lot of the openings where they already have a list of 2 or 3 others, either who have already applied or they know people in the community, and that they're just going out and getting those folks and bringing them in, and that they don't even have to put it on the institutional website. So, if you're looking to be an adjunct faculty person, you need to get in on that inside because they might not always advertise everything. And then the other next two there, national publications and adjunct matching services, that obviously those are, as you see there, they're used quite a bit less. I did talk to one rural university that was in a very specialized healthcare field, and they said that they did use national publications, national resources, and I think some of those fall under the other as well, is that they use the professional associations as well, because they just locally in this rural community or even in the rural state, they probably have very few people with the credentials to serve as faculty in that role, and so that they did have to go nationally. So there are times where you do have to reach out, but certainly it came back over and over again that for the most part, at least for gen ed courses and other more widely available courses and disciplines, that people were able to go locally. And then the last point on that is that, and some were even restricted by state regulations, that we talked about to some of the public institutions, and they said they were forbidden from hiring people from out of state, which surprised me a bit, but I guess it shouldn't surprise me anymore. But they couldn't go out of state to hire anyone, so there you have it. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide there, and we look at, and then here's a quote from a different rural public university. They were having trouble finding faculty for some of their regional centers where they teach courses, but they said they really do not have trouble, even in a rural state, finding faculty. And then, of course, you get into a point that David made that when you get into supply and demand, that if you have readily available faculty, that will tend to depress pay, unfortunately. Let's move to the next slide and go to a whole different issue and talk about the variance with what institutions are doing in terms of working with faculty. And let's look at the next slide and the chart there. And this one looks at how often faculty were evaluated by students. And we're going to go through several different ones of these, 3 different ones about evaluation. And so this is one that is not all that surprising, where students are evaluating faculty once per term in the vast majority of places, and so we see that's good. Let's go ahead and move to the next slide, and this is where the supervisor. So again, being evaluated by the supervisor. So there you see more of a trend away from every term towards many more of them are evaluating just once a year, and then you get down to probably one of my favorite numbers in the whole survey is that 11% down there of never. And I'm just head scratching on that one, can't figure that out. What that's saying then is that there is no supervisor who ever evaluates these adjunct faculty. So I don't know how they keep them on or how they know if they're any good or what the quality is. So that's 1 out of 9 institutions that responded to this survey. I'm hoping I'm not sure what to make of that. And so again, the vast majority, like all of these things, the vast majority of institutions are doing very good practices, but there seem to be a few that are doing some weird things on the edges. In the final one of the evaluation ones, let's go to the next screen, and that one has to do with what's become fairly popular in recent years is peer faculty, but it's still fairly small in terms of the number of institutions that are doing that. And so we're curious about that, about peer reviews, and so still about 3/4 are not doing that, but some really are, and I suppose there could be that some have replaced that supervisor faculty with peer-to-peer reviews, but who knows? We did not ask that. Let's move away from evaluation to the next slide and get at some other issues that we have there. And then these are some things that we wanted to see whether they're required in terms of what we're calling the onboarding, in terms of orientation, and what were requirements, and so are you letting faculty know about the academic and student policies? And still that's just about 3 out of 5 that you see there. Different types of, and then the one about the support services, it's about the same. And then we've got some different variations in terms of what institutions are doing in terms of teaching about technologies and such. And so you can see quite a wide variance there, and that there's some things in terms of what they're doing about the teaching methods and what they found there. And then let's see, so before the first online class, and so in some of the interviews that we had, that we really found a wide disparity. And again, I'm going to do the far endpoints in talking about this. One is that one institution that what they did, one of the institutions that what they did was that they had, if you're a new online faculty person, they required 3 weeks of training, followed by a discussion with all the faculty who were teaching that course that term. So you could discuss things like, how does this course fit into the sequence? What are we trying to get? What are our get out of this course? What are our outcomes? What are our assessments? And you get to meet the other faculty. And then they had ongoing conversations throughout the term. And then I talked to another person who was one person in charge of all the adjuncts, whether face-to-face or online, and she had no training, and just if she thought if she could get up to an hour to talk to each person prior to their teaching their first class, that was about all she could do. So it was kind of a wide range there, and that we can see why some faculty might have trouble, and students as well, if really essentially all you're doing is handing the faculty person the syllabus and a password and then hoping everything goes well from there. So I gave you the endpoints on that, but there's a lot of institutions in the middle in terms of what they're doing. With
Russ?
that, yes.
Just wanted to pose a question up to you. It was on your previous slide about policies for formal evaluation of online adjunct faculty. Can you just talk a little bit on what we meant by when we say formal evaluation? What kind of would fall into that category?
Yeah, so we use those terms, and that's a good point, that some people may have interpreted that differently, but we meant some sort of official process that was done. That could vary quite a bit from the students. Typically that's just a survey, to a supervisor. That could be a wide variety of things, from sitting in on a course to sitting down with the faculty person and going through what they have. So we're imagining that there's a large number of sins, if I can use that word, a large number of activities that go under that, but we meant that it's something where it was intentional, and that you were had some expectations up front of the faculty person, and that you were seeing whether the faculty person met those expectations. That's how I would read it.
All right, thank you.
And let's move to the next slide and back to David.
Yeah, so this was kind of an eye-opener for us as we review the data that many institutions don't have written policies outlining the expectations for the faculty member, primarily in how often and how they interact with students in their courses. So let me show you the data here in the next slide. And this slide is a little complicated, so I'll walk you folks through it. So if you look at the top bar, is there a written policy for posting a topic on a message board, for example? And going from left to right, 10% of the responding institutions had an expectation that the faculty would respond within 24 hours. You see the color coordination there across the bottom. Another 10% expected response to that message post within 48 hours, and then 2% within 72, and the blue bar 5% within a week. But then the big blue bar there, 74%, had no expectation or no written expectation about posting on the message board in their courses. So if you kind of track down on the blue section, it's easy to see. The second question was responding to student posts on a message board. Again, half here, 54%, didn't have any written expectations. In terms of grading assignments, again, half don't have any expectations or guidelines that are written for their faculty, where at the opposite end, 9% expected it within 48 hours. And then responding to student email, 23% on the far left said within 24 hours, where 40% didn't have any written expectations. So let's clarify a little bit about when we say written expectations. Some institutions reported that they had handbooks or guidelines, but they didn't specify in a policy about this. And then there were some institutions that told us that based on their master agreement or master contract, if they had unionized faculty, they were prohibited from setting expectations and tracking those kinds of responses. So there's some variation there. But the fact that it seems like the majority of institutions don't have written expectations for how faculty interact with their students in their online classes leaves a lot of opportunity for institutions to think this through and come up with what they would see would be reasonable guidelines, and then give some direction to their faculty to ensure a high level or quality interaction within their classes. The next conclusion is one of the more, I think, important ones of the whole study, and we asked the respondents about the level of flexibility or freedom that adjunct faculty had when they designed and taught their courses. And there's kind of a split almost right down the middle. We'll see the data here in the next slide, that about half of the institutions have no restrictions or almost no restrictions, that the faculty members on the left-hand side here, the 31% and 20%, in the 31% faculty, the adjunct faculty designs their own course from the ground up. And they teach and put in it whatever they want. The 20% that permit 100% customization give the instructor a sample course, but then they can change anything that they want within that course. On the other side of the ledger, the half on the right, are those that allow some customization or down to none. So in this case, there's a master course or a course that's been designed and developed by maybe a senior faculty member at the institution or previous faculty, and the new person, the adjunct that's teaching this course, is given that already constructed course. 11%, about 1 in 10, say you can't change anything in this course. Another 12% say you can have minimal customization, and about a quarter allow some customization. In my experience, this typically means that there's a master course or a standard course that's given to the faculty, so it ensures that there's some consistency across multiple sections of the same class or the class being taught at different times throughout the year, and faculty are oftentimes restricted that they can't change the outcomes or maybe the assessment methods or the textbook, but they're given the ability to add materials and resources based on their experience or enhance the course in other ways. So this seems to be a clear philosophical difference between the institutions that participated in the survey. Some leave it up to the adjunct faculty to really design and build that course. Other ones give them a set course and allow some customization, but within certain guidelines. So it's a key distinction and a kind of a philosophy on how you approach course design, and then the responsibilities and duties of the adjunct. You want to keep in mind some of the coming slides that how much support services faculty are given, especially adjuncts, when it comes to things like course design, how much training they're given. Russ shared the slide earlier about the amount of training that they're given before they teach that first class, and in some cases it's minimal, other cases it's more substantive. But you would hope that the institutions that permit full customization or permit the faculty member to create their own course from scratch, that they give them support with instructional designers and other kinds of training on technology so they can do a good job of that. But we don't know that from this particular survey just how much of that is going on. Let's look at the next.
Hey, Dave, can I just chime in for a second?
Yeah, sure.
It goes for both both Russ and Dave. You know, someone was asking about if we're aware of any similar surveys that have been done on the non-adjunct faculty side, just for a little comparison between our results and some that would maybe apply to non-adjunct faculty in terms of training, best practices for working online.
That's a good question. I mean, I don't know of any particular surveys that are given to regular faculty that would address that question, to be honest with you, especially as it pertains to online classes. I know that in practice, again, there's a wide range of behaviors or practices there. At the Learning House, we work with about 75 different colleges and universities. Some of them, similar to this data, permit 100% customization. Other ones have a real strict master course philosophy, and you follow that philosophy. And my general experience is that as institutions become more adept, or they offer more and more online courses, they tend to move more towards a standardized course philosophy because they're concerned about quality across sections and a uniform student experience. But that's just my personal opinion.
And Dave, just one more just popped in. I just wanted to ask if you're aware of institutions that have a central individual who oversees online adjunct faculty and courses for the entire institution, or is it generally broken down at the department or program level for overseeing these individuals?
You know, I don't recall the specific data, but in the study we asked institutions that if they had a centralized administrative structure in terms of supervising the online programs and online faculty, and we got a mixture of responses there. The larger universities tend to be more decentralized, where each academic unit creates their own policies and their own supervisory practices. Smaller institutions tend to generally have one central person that manages all their online operations, so there's consistency within the institution. Russ, do you have a comment about that?
Yeah, I think I was going to say pretty much the same thing, because I did talk to one person at a community college. It was a mid-sized community college, and she was in charge of all the adjuncts, whether they, and contingent faculty, whether they were online or face-to-face. So there you had one person in control. But then we also had some people who didn't answer the survey, because just the point that you made, that they're at a large university and every single college did something different. And so and we bring up the point in the document and in our recommendations is that that could end up being problematic if you start running into issues in terms of policies or hiring people that were fired by another unit of the university, or you have too many hours, that could be a problem. And so we're seeing a lot of that where it's dispersed all across the institution.
All right, thank you.
Russ, we're ready to move on to number 9 here about the training.
Okay, I'll do that, and we'll move forward quickly with this. Let's go ahead and go to the slide here that in terms of the training and getting people, if we could move to the next slide, some of the training that we're seeing here, that there's some variety here in terms of what's available that most institutions are providing. And if you look at these, the light blue is that it's offered free of charge, and that the dark blue is that it's required, so that you see where quite a number of institutions offer some sort of professional development, but it's less often that they require it. And then I want to point out the instructional design, and then going back to the point that David was making in terms of the customized option, that if you're going to ask a faculty person to either fully customize or fully create a course, that you better have some instructional support for them, that you want to have that for them. And so then you can see some of the other activities that we have here. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide, and just want to point out one other one down here. And my favorite down at the bottom here again is that for professional development, again, that we have none, that we have a small number where they don't require it at all, or 11% that don't require it for all. And we did talk to people where that they're barred from making any requirements on faculty, and that you have the stunning number of 3% down there who don't even offer anything free of charge, or have seemingly have no professional development activities. And I hope that they just answered that wrong, but who knows with that. With that, that's the end of our conclusions, and we're going to move on to our recommendations. And let's go ahead and move on to the first of those, and that is about back to this issue that Dave brought up in conclusion number 8, about the 2 different models of the customized versus the master course model, is that you need to understand the culture of your institution and the rules of your institution, and then pick one of those models, or pick a model, even if it's not one of those, and just really stick with it and fully develop it. We saw a few times, and especially in some of the conversations I had, where they had chosen a customized model, but because of either rules or faculty contracts or the culture of the institution, whatever, that they weren't able to give the full support for those faculty to create those courses. That's a real problem, because the thinking is still that all these rules are for the face-to-face course where you can just get a faculty person and stick them in front of the room. You can't do that online, so you need to have the instructional design and technical support. So on the master course side, that you need to get into that, and you must involve the faculty into improving the course. And we heard of some really great examples of that, where they encouraged faculty to interact with each other throughout the course, and one even had a database where they could collect suggestions for improvements as the person was teaching the course, and so therefore they were improving the course as they went along. Because you know how it is that you get to the end of the semester, and I said, I remember there was something in week 4 that was wrong, but if you could get that right away, that feedback, that really helps to improve, and you just need to get into it. The second recommendation that we have here is setting clear expectations for the faculty and the students. You know, a good practice for students is letting them know what sort of turnaround parameters that they can expect for questions or assessments. And if faculty don't set, in my view, then if faculty don't set these parameters, students expect that the feedback will be immediate. And that's ends up being a problem for the faculty person. So institution needs to help the faculty with that, and then also if they're going to evaluate the faculty person on that interaction, then that faculty person needs to be informed of that ahead of time of anything that they're going to be evaluated upon. Third of the recommendations that we have about using best practices in selecting new adjunct faculty. Faculty onboarding should be considered a big deal. This is somebody who's new to your institution, maybe newer to teaching, maybe newer to online. They need to know what your policies are. They need to know what your deadlines are. They need to know how to use the technologies that you're using and do it well. They need to know what faculty support is available. Is there instructional design? Are there tools to prevent cheating? Is there ways to communicate with other faculty? Is there technical support if the browser or computer isn't working? And then finally, what student services are available? Can they send students off to tutoring or help with accessibility issues or technical support or advising? What can they do for students? They need to know these things to make sure that the student succeeds. Dave, I'll send it on to you.
Sure thing. So continuing on with helping train faculty is ongoing professional development. And a strong recommendation is that institutions have a comprehensive system to help their faculty continue to get better and to involve the adjunct faculty in the overall life and governance of the institution. They can be great people to mentor new faculty coming in. They can build courses. They can serve on committees and task forces. And so involving the adjunct faculty in the life of the institution enhances their commitment, encourages their continued development, and invests them in the institution. If the institution takes an interest in their people, invests in their training and development and ongoing practice, then oftentimes people reported to us that these adjunct faculty return that back to the institution. They feel allegiance, they give extra, and they want to participate and be involved. And we had a number of outstanding examples of how that works. Even the evaluation system, some faculty view that as an investment in them. If the institution takes time to evaluate them, give them feedback about their performance, they saw that as a positive because it showed that the institution cared about them and their ongoing development. So highly recommended that you have a comprehensive system in place. And there's a number of institutions that do that. The next one about involving them in the life of the institution, as I said, serving on committees, helping advise doctoral students, if there's doctoral programs in the institution, maybe more for a select group, but participating in in-service, leading in-service activities for other faculty members, mentoring junior people, serving on committees and task force. Some institutions, because they have a lot of online programs, have it as a matter of course that any faculty meeting is done electronically, so people don't have to be physically present. It's an important thing if you want to involve adjuncts because they oftentimes aren't there in a proximity to the institution. And finally, one that's important is to understand all the internal, external policies and how they impact online faculty. Intellectual property rights is a big one. If faculty are developing their own courses, they need to have a good understanding of what they're allowed to include and disseminate to students. The full-time status thing we've mentioned several times. It's clear that a number of participants in this survey are violating some national and probably state regulations about full-time status for people, so they need to be careful about that. And this instance that Russ mentioned where people from the same institution are hiring and using the same people, they could exceed those limits or they could be hiring people that have been dismissed at other parts of the university. And academic cheating is an important one. If the institution has policies around this, they need to communicate that clearly and make the tools available to those adjuncts so they can enforce the plagiarism and academic dishonesty policies of the institution. A number of kind of landmines there that you can step on more easily, I think, with adjuncts if institutions aren't careful and don't have a good tracking mechanism and training mechanism for those adjuncts. So that concludes our kind of formal presentation. We're anxious to take questions now. We will, here's the URL where you can download copies of the report, and as we said at the beginning, you'll get access to the slides here that we used today, but you can read the full report at the website there. Let's open it up now and see if there's questions and comments from folks, and we'll open up the line so that if you want to talk, we can take a verbal question and respond to it as well. Fire away.
All right, thanks, Dave. So if anyone wants to ask a question on your, I believe it's the lower right-hand portion of the screen, I believe, you click the raise hand button, and I'll try to look for you and unmute your line, and you can ask the question right there over the phone. My colleagues will try to keep an eye on the text Q&A while I'm monitoring the phone lines, but we did have one just pop in now in the text version, Dave. Individuals maybe disagreeing that adjunct faculty are steadily employed. Adjuncts or do the, so, you know, again, our survey was, you know, finding that, you know, adjunct turnover was rather, you know, low term to term. So I guess maybe there could be some different types of institutions could have different levels of turnover. Russ and Dave, I don't know if you talked to any institutions that maybe went against that trend of steady employment, or did you not bring that up with them?
You want to start, David?
Well, I recall one conversation with a person who was pretty proud of the overall supervisory program and support services they had in place, and it was a point of pride for this individual that they had very, very low turnover because it was a great place to teach. You know, I think that some institutions, if you saw the negative side, there was a wide range on almost all these questions. Institutions that provide little support to their adjuncts, have high expectations, but very little training and supervision and guidance, there may be a lot higher turnover. I would think there would be in those institutions than ones that, in a sense, take care of their adjuncts and rely on them and use them and involve them.
And so the people we talked to, that there were ones who volunteered. We had a question on the survey whether they would like to volunteer for follow-up, and we didn't follow up with all of them, but tried to get a variety of institutions from across the U.S. and of different types. And we talked to just a few of them, and of those, that there was only one of them that had practices that I wouldn't want to share with a whole lot of people. So it may be certainly in the stats we're seeing low turnover, and in the I guess in all the discussions I had that there was low turnover, but that may be skewed a bit by who volunteered to be asked. But it did seem pretty strong in terms of the ones we talked to and what the stats said, that there at least the turnover from the institution's point of view was not very high.
All right, we have a live question now from like Sherry from BCIT. I just unmuted your line, Sherry. Do you have a question for us?
No, I didn't ask to have a question, but I'm curious about unionized environments. Here at BCIT, we have two sets of different unions in our institute, and because of the unionized environment, we are very careful about what we're allowed to do in performance evaluations. And one of the things where we have a problem is that some of the students want to be evaluating their instructors, but that is because of the collective agreements, we're not allowed to do that. And I just wondered if that was something that happened in the States as well.
You know, our survey doesn't directly address that question. Again, we had some anecdotes where people commented on that, but it wasn't we didn't try to track how many, you know, adjuncts teach in unionized environments and how many were restricted. We did show the data about the number, and these are administrators that report how often they evaluate their faculty. And the majority of institutions have student evaluations going on a term-by-term basis.
Yeah, and going a little off evaluations, because I don't know that I talked specifically about that, but I did actually most of the institutions I talked to were actually, in fact, unionized, or at least half of them were, that they were unionized, and that they found that there indeed were some restrictions not only on evaluation but also in terms of other sorts of requirements in terms of making sure that they could require that faculty learn about the LMS, that they learn about certain things about teaching online. And I think that in my opinion, it wasn't always just the union agreements. There's also sometimes policy outside of agreements or other sorts of things in the culture. But a lot of that came from the teaching of the vast majority of the thinking of the vast majority of the faculty that whatever works face-to-face should be the same as online. But it seems to me you can't have it both ways. You can't say that you can't hamper online. That requires it does require more training. It does require getting up to speed in how you are successful online, and then be surprised that when you don't allow those faculty to develop in the proper way, that then the students don't perform as well. And that's a bit of a problem for me.
Again, if anyone has any questions they want to ask live, just use the raised hand button on your screen, and I'll try to find you and unmute you. Russ, I think this one might be a little more up your alley. We have it in the text questions. Is there a place where model policies and procedures for supporting adjunct part-time faculty could be housed or made available? So are you aware of any perhaps organizations or places where best practices around adjunct faculty are posted?
Well, let's see. I guess I'm not aware of one. I guess it'd be interesting to see what. So there's several organizations that are starting to sprout up that are paying attention to faculty issues, like new faculty majority. I think they tend to be focused much more on the compensation, employment sorts of issues, and those were ones that we stayed away from intentionally because we wanted to focus on the practices. And we've tried to do this before, and one of the problems with keeping policy databases is that they're out of date so fast. So it is a hard thing, but I think it would be good to try to do something where if somebody could, WCT or some others or us together could at least do some exemplars in terms of what could be done. But I'm not aware of anyone who's doing that.
So there are two in here that I think I can get to, asking about if there were any for-profit institutions or wholly online institutions that either responded to or were included in the survey. The survey did go out to over 3,000 different individuals. There were for-profit institutions and wholly online institutions included in that sample, but in terms of the respondents, the for-profit response, I believe, was only a small handful of institutions. So again, I wouldn't think these results are generalizable to that population. And for wholly online institutions, again, not a huge, response there to call it, generalizable to that population. We have another question here. Let's see. Did the survey include specific topics for continuing education offerings that adjuncts would find beneficial? Russ or Dave, do you have any comment about that? Beneficial continuing ed for online?
Yeah, this is Dave. We asked about general practices, like how often and what was required or what was optional, but we didn't get into the area of topics, which topics would be of most interest to adjuncts, or which topics for in-service training programs that institutions had offered in the past. That may be a good topic to for survey number 2 in the future, to get at more of the kinds of content or materials that adjunct faculty would like to know more about. But we didn't do it this time.
Yeah, the closest we got were questions about general teaching practices was one, and another was about are they up to speed on technologies like the LMS, but not beyond that.
Yeah, I believe we had a question there about surveying your online adjunct faculty and asking them specifically what they would, most be interested in terms of training. So I think, with obviously not a large number, I believe, that they do regularly survey their adjunct faculty or online adjunct faculty, but again, that could be another consideration is posing the question directly to them and asking which areas they may need additional training in or be interested in learning more about.
Good idea.
Right. We didn't specifically ask that because again, we were surveying the institution and not necessarily adjuncts directly.
I'm thinking about a previous question about places where people could find exemplary or model programs. There's another organization, I don't know if they have it, but the POD network may have resources. That organization focuses on best practices for faculty development in general. They may have resources about adjunct and online faculty as well. That'd be a place to look. The POD network, P-O-D.
Did some institutions require adjuncts to participate in QM or OLC courses?
QM? Quality Matters?
Yep.
Didn't ask that again specifically, but some of the institutions require faculty to participate in training about pedagogical practices, and I would assume that some of that would be there, but we didn't ask it specifically.
So for
we did ask on the one question about professional associations. Were you going to say that, Andrew? Let's see.
Yeah, I'm just looking it up now. Professional development experiences offered by professional organizations, 0% require, 20% offer free of charge. Credit-bearing courses, 2% require. Attending conferences relating to online ed, 2% require. So again, very low single digits or low.
Yeah, we weren't specific to the organization, but to the idea of.
Yeah, I think that's what we had in mind was the OLC QM type. But yeah, again, 0% for professional development experiences offered by professional organizations such as OLC, and credit-bearing courses, again, 2%. So very low to none, I would say there. For any of the presenters, can you identify perhaps the top 5 most important topics for training adjuncts?
Well, I think I kind of went through some of those in my closing there. Is that and maybe one I didn't add is that can they teach? But that's a whole other thing. But beyond that, that they really need to know if it's online, that they need to know how to use whatever technologies that you have. They really need to know what the policies are of the institutions, because you could get into some bad places if they don't know the policies. And then what support is available for faculty, and what support is available for the online student. I know that those are things, because I can see if they get into trouble or their students get in trouble, that I've seen a couple times where the adjunct faculty wants to do a good job, and so they're trying to do it themselves when there's others out there or other resources out there that could help them. And so let's make sure that they know how to do that.
Yeah, I have one comment about that. I think that the most important topic is what is effective online pedagogy. Good online teaching is different than good face-to-face teaching. Different skill set, different ways of behaving, different activities that really good online faculty members do that they may or may not do in a face-to-face environment. So at the end of the day, programs that teach those principles of what's really effective in an online classroom, how to encourage students, how to motivate students, appropriate responses on the message board, the kind of responses that engender deeper thinking and more in-depth work on the part of the student versus cutting off the discussion. There's good work around this in a number of organizations, And that, to me, I think is the #1 thing that should be included in a good faculty development program.
Right, right. And it's not just slides online, and it's not just taped recordings of lectures online. It's got to be more than that.
Mm-hmm.
All right, we have two on deck on the phone line. First, we have Kara Lee from Geneva College. Just unmuted your line. Anyone?
Hi, Kara Lee.
Sorry, you just answered it. I put it in the discussion board also. Thanks.
All right,
okay.
And we got one more from, it's, let me see, Catherine from SUNY. I just unmuted your line. You have a question for us today?
You did answer my question because I teach in a completely online program. I was just wondering about your sample, and you did answer that there were a few completely online programs that did respond to your survey. And just as an aside, we do not distinguish between adjunct faculty and full-time faculty when we do orientations. And so that would be a great distinction in some of your responses that you did get. That's all that I had to say.
So tell us about your orientation program. What does it include?
It is essentially you are paired with a full-time faculty member. You are enrolled in a live course as well as the design courses. We have design courses so that they're not required to design their own courses. They do have academic freedom to, how shall I say, discussion questions, how they respond to discussion questions. But we also have best practices that are the same for full-time faculty as they are for adjuncts. And we have the best practices for responding to discussion questions, assignments, responding to questions and answers, email. So there is no distinction between the two, and I don't think that our adjuncts, at least the feedback that we've gotten, is positive, that they're not simply an addition. They are part of the team, but it's an intense orientation.
That's clearly a best practice. How do you deliver your orientation? Is it part of a course that people take, or is it like a one-day workshop?
No, it's actually a few weeks out before our sessions begin. Our sessions, we run 2 sessions per semester. So when an adjunct is hired, their preceptor will get in touch with them, and then we have an orientation course that is on our learning platform. And it's broken down into all the elements that are required, whether it's the prelim work, what's the HR, how do you respond to posts. So everything is broken down so that when they go into that course, they're prepared. But then preceptors are also available, whether it's through Skype or email. And I am a preceptor, and I make sure that I'm available all the time to answer questions.
So is a preceptor kind of like a mentor, a senior person who could help them teach that class or be a resource?
We do make a distinction between mentors and preceptors. Preceptor is the one that you're assigned to. The mentor is the one who you admire most and you'd like to emulate.
Hopefully they're both the same, right?
We would hope so. We would hope so. But we do have a standardized best practice that is housed on another site. So when a change is made to one course, it goes into every course and it goes to every instructor. But they're never out there on their own. And actually the retention rate, I've been with the program now for 5 years, and I only know of one person that's left.
Yeah. You know, Russ, I'm thinking about the WCET conference next year, or maybe a webinar where we get 2 or 3 institutions like this with exemplary practices on how they onboard and develop and supervise their adjuncts. That'd probably be in the absence of publications or other studies, that may be a good resource or an offering for WCET to think about.
Yeah, and I think that's right. That's certainly something that we like to do, is get people to contrast and compare the things that they're doing that they've had successful. And then just one brief clarification on what Catherine said, that I think she said it's not that we didn't have that many online programs, so we just had a few fully online institutions. And so I imagine most of the institutions that responded do have online programs, and so just to clarify.
Great. I did see one other question up in the text that I think I missed during the webinar, asking if we're aware of institutions that charge that have different compensation for face-to-face or versus online adjuncts. So does the compensation vary depending on the delivery mode of the same course?
We didn't ask that in the survey. It's not a question we have data about. In my experience, that's not common, that they're typically paid the same.
Where I would see it is if the course is offered by a continuing education unit versus, so if you're in a public university that has a continuing education unit that's offering it, sometimes I've seen where the compensation for people over in that unit may be different than the compensation for somebody who's a staff person or a faculty person who's teaching the course on overload or what have you. I have seen differences there, but I don't know that I've, other than that, I haven't seen much in terms of the differences. Doesn't mean that they're not there, but that's not common is right.
All right, any final questions from our audience, either through the chat or by raising your hand there? I don't see anything new popping in at the moment.
About final comment, and for me, I'd just like to say that it was great working with Russ and the folks at WCET. Obviously, adjunct faculty use, especially in the online environment, is going to continue to grow. More and more institutions are adding online programs, and the ones that have them are increasing their use of adjuncts. So it's an important part of the academic workforce. We need to know more about it. We need to know about best practices so that we ensure high-quality instruction. So I'm grateful for the chance to do this kind of initial survey. It's a good place to start. And I hope that you folks that are participating today will share your best practices via professional outlets like WCET.
All right, I think that will conclude our webinar today. Again, thank you everyone for joining us. On the screen there you see the URL for downloading the report. So we look forward to you reading it, and if you have any questions or comments about the report, you can feel free to reach out to Dave or Russ. Their contact information is there, and we will be emailing out these slides and this a link to the recording on the next day or so. So again, thank you for taking the time for joining us.
Thank you.